then I will request Averell to take a Zoom group photo, and from there, you can help us.
Thank you, everyone. We would like to have a group photo, so please stay pin our moderator and speaker and also organizer. Thank you.
Averell, have you taken the picture? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, speakers, for joining the session and putting up your points. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I think they're trying to take a picture with us.
Yeah.
So Parker, I think you should get back on. Looks
And
like they're
we
done.
are done right now. Thank you for
right.
joining. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Hear me? Can you hear me? Can oh, okay.
Welcome, everyone. I think we are ready to start. Valeria, can you just confirm for us if the online, it's channel 5, is that correct? Channel 5, everyone. And are our online speakers with us? Good, so we're just waiting for Jason. So everyone, my name is Anriette Esterhuizen. I'm with the Association for Progressive Communications. I want to welcome everyone for being here today with us. And also to tell you we're going to do the session a little bit differently. I'll shortly be asking you all to take your headset and stand up. But before we do that, I just want to introduce the session. I'm going to take this off for now. I hear an echo. You know what it is? It's my Zoom. I need to switch my speaker on. So welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us. We've heard a lot about WSIS. We've heard a lot about the Global Digital Compact in the last few days. Is there anyone in the room who doesn't know what WSIS stands for? I dare you. No, I'm serious. Is there anyone who doesn't know what WSIS stands for? Well, that's good. GDC. So, and this session, we actually want to build on all the previous discussions, because there's been many of them, and I think we're all together actually paving this way towards a better understanding of how these processes relate to one another, but specifically how we can harmonize strategies for coordinated implementation. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We have a fantastic panel. I'm going to give you your names. Later on, they can say a little bit more about themselves. We have Amrita Chaudhry from India, representing civil society, also a past member of the MAG. Jorge Cancio from Switzerland, from the Swiss, from BACOM, the Swiss Ofcom, the Swiss Office of Communications. We have online Jason Pielemeyer over there from a multi-stakeholder initiative called GNI, Global Network Initiative, a membership organization. We have David Fairchild from the Government of Canada in the Geneva mission, very closely involved in all of this. And online we have Anita Gurumurthy from IT for Change in India, but also part of something called the Global Digital Justice Forum. I want to introduce my colleague, my online moderator, Valeria Betancourt from APC, who leads APC's global governance work. And we have as our rapporteur, Bruna, who is also on the MAG, and then Gitanjali from the ITU, also known as Ms. WSIS. I'm gonna use that because someone and I'm grandmother WSIS, so really enjoy that label. So before we start, I'm going to ask everyone now to get up. Put your bags down, put your cell phones down. Most importantly, put your cell phones down or put them in your pocket, but take this with you. Okay. Take this with us? Yes. Larry, you can stay there.
I stay here, yeah, to channel the.
So you have to be there. I want you to go into that open space at the back. Just stand around, and I'm going to make you think, work, and talk, and walk.
Oh, Lord.
And we're going to do a spectrogram exercise. Has anyone ever done a spectrogram before?
No.
You have, good. So I'm going to make a statement. And then based on your reaction to the statement, and remember, it's the IGF, you are here as individuals, you're not here as delegations, even though you might think you are. And so you can just have a gut reaction. If you agree with that statement, I want you to stand over there. If you disagree violently, over there. If you're uncertain, just position yourself somewhere along an imaginary line. I haven't said anything yet. Okay, here's the first statement. The Global Digital Compact provides exactly the agenda which the IGF needs to become more focused and effective. If you agree over there, if you disagree over there, if you think there's a little bit of both, somewhere in the middle. Okay. Okay, let me ask someone. I'm going to ask you, sorry to do this to you, Justin, but you are kind of, I would say, just off center left. Why do you stand here? What is your view? And sorry, the idea is that as you listen to people, I'll ask other people, you can put your hands up if you want to contribute. If you feel that the response is making you shift your position a little bit, then move your body to shift. Either you disagree even more or you actually find yourself moving a little bit.
I would say that the GDC is a good outcome. I think it has a good plan, norms, principles, some of the commitments, all that's good, some of the way forward. But if you, it's still a negotiated document and there was a lot of kind of compromise from different folks in it. And so ultimately, I don't think it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But I would still say, if I'm in the center left camp here, that it's fairly good and something that can be built on going forward. On the IGF, I think that there's a lot in there for the IGF. Now, some of this was explicit, and I think was thought through how the IGF, but some of it is how the IGF responds to that. It's not what New York or what member states tell the IGF to do, but also there's work there. And I think now the question is, does the IGF community agree that there's work that's relevant for the community here to take forward?
If I was standing over there, I think I would have moved a little bit. I think these agendas are what we make of them. Anyone on that side who disagrees that the GDC gives the IGF what it needs, that want to share their view? No one here wants to speak. Flavio? No. Anyone else who wants to comment on this? Jorge, do you want to say anything?
Yeah. Sorry. Jorge Gancia, Swiss government. So my question would be, where's the money for the IGF, for instance? So I think the GDC is a reasonable outcome for the negotiation it was. So it could have been much worse if we look at the initial draft, for instance. But it leaves many things open. And now, similarly to what Justin said, the ball is in the air. We have to kick it into the right direction. And the IGF community has a very important role to play there. But I think on the substance, there are many interesting, reasonable things we have to address. I'm completely in agreement with that. But on the architecture, I think there are some dangers there.
Thanks, Jorge. Valeria, is there anyone online that wants to, I see Christine there as well. I see Anita and Jason. If you were in the room, where would you stand? GDC gives the IGF exactly the agenda it needs, or you don't think so?
Can
Anita
I come?
and yes, Christine, and then Anita.
I would be leaning towards the right of the room, but then I might take a few steps because there's some truth to that, just not completely. So yeah.
And Christine, just introduce yourself to everyone,
Sorry,
please.
I'm Christina Vida with the government of Egypt.
Thanks, Christine. Anita.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I would stand in the middle and agree with Jorge and Justin, because I think we mustn't also forget that the objective of the GDC was not to actually provide direction for improving the IGF or make it effective. You know, that was not the stated objective. And of course, I think where is the money is a very, very important question. On the other hand, I do think that the GDC broadens the issues at stake for an inclusive information society, which the IGF can and must take up.
Thanks, Anita. I'm just going to ask Justin to introduce himself because I forgot to do that earlier.
Sorry, Justin Fair, U.S. State Department.
Okay. Now, you all did fairly well there. The next statement is the concept of an inclusive, people-centered information society that came out of the WSIS is obsolete. Agree on this side, disagree on that side. I think people are right when they say the IGF lacks diversity. Okay. Anyone want to say why they are standing where they are standing? There are quite a few people in the middle.
Hi, my name is Amrita. I think, while the WSIS talks about information society, I think it's still important because many of the visions in the WSIS have not been met yet. Like, for example, we are not connected yet. But again, the WSIS talks about internet and how it is used. So even if you're talking about digital technologies or any emerging technologies, they come under the overview of how internet is used. So you may use different ways, but the basic essence of WSIS still runs true. I would not call it obsolete. You may want to add a bit of it to it, like information and digital societies, like NetMundial tried to do. That's my take.
Are any of you, I'll come to you just now, Justin, but are people still using the concept of information society at all in their own disciplines or their works, or the concept of knowledge society?
In fact, Anurag, we work very closely with many UN agencies. So we've expanded it into information and knowledge societies at the ITU. The Council Working Group on WSIS calls it information and knowledge societies to include UNESCO's work, FAO's work. And so it's even more than that.
And in fact, I heard the ADG of UNESCO say yesterday, they're also now including, they're linking data to data and information and how they relate to one another into transforming into knowledge. So they still have that concept there. Justin, yes, you're actually in exactly the same spot you were before. Diplomats.
No, I stayed here because I mean, somewhat agree that I think that if you look back at the original WSIS documents, a lot of the norms and principles we've seen an evolution of those from, through the years, including through WSIS plus 10, and then even more recently with GDC, where that seems to have been updated. And that was one of the key elements of WSIS. A lot of the development plan has evolved over the years, including with the SDGs coming on top of it, which seems to have changed a lot of the development. And then one key thing the WSIS did is provide some framework on how different UN agencies or stakeholders can cooperate on certain areas, and then how they can come together through different processes in a follow-up and review. And all of that seems to have changed over the years. So I think in that way, going back to, to those that are purists and look back to the original, it seems to have way changed from early 2000s on that. But I agree with Gitanjali that just means that it's an evolving process, and not to get too rigid in, you know, these exact outcomes from many years ago, because I think that there is a lot that's been kind of evolved since then, updates, developments, new processes, things of that nature, which have kind of breathed new life into that. And so the question just going forward is how to do that, how to take a framework that has matured over the years, has changed and evolved, is still effective, but only if we can continue to strengthen it and evolve it.
Sorry, you want us to move? So people, please come
You're pushing me into
inside.
this
Please come
strongly
inside
disagree
so that
camp.
we can, we're nearly finished, so I think it's fine. Okay, so anyone else who was standing on this more sort of that information society is an obsolete concept that wanted to add anything? Okay, then I'm going to go to my last statement, which was, none of them turned out to be as provocative as I hoped they would, but this one might. The multi-stakeholder approach to digital cooperation entrenches existing dynamics of power and influence. The multi-stakeholder approach entrenches the status quo, existing dynamics of power and influence and internet governance. If you agree, over here, somewhere in the middle over there, if you disagree that the multi-stakeholder approach entrenches existing dynamics of power and influence, over there. Are you willing to speak? Just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Big from Vietnam. So I think, people, we talk more and more about this concept today, multiple, multi-stakeholders. But from, my background, and in the region as well, I feel like it's still very much state-centric. So when we talk about that, then maybe, it poses a challenge to the existing system.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of people in civil society during WSIS who supported the multi-stakeholder approach, believing that it would give them more power and influence. And I'm not sure they always feel they really got that. But anyone there who feels that the multi-stakeholder approach has created more inclusion, democratization, anyone who wants to offer a view, introduce yourself, please.
Yes, Nigel Casimir from the Caribbean Telecommunications Union. I think if you look at the difference between something like the WSIS outcome document and the GDC, you see a lot more commitment in the multi-stakeholder. So I think it just takes time, right? What multi-stakeholder is trying to do is influence the multilateral framework. And you're seeing, I would say, influence, certainly, right? And it's not something that will happen overnight. So I don't think it entrenches. I think it is working, but slowly to gain influence in the multilateral things.
Thanks, Nigel. And I must say, I follow your work quite closely. And I think what I see in the Caribbean is actually a real demonstration of how partnership and collaboration just deepens over time. Anyone online who want to respond to this statement? Valeria, is there? No. Anyone there who really supports the multi-stakeholder approach and wants to add? Anita, please go ahead, and then we'll give it to one more person, and then you can all sit down.
Okay. I agree with my colleague from Vietnam that there is always in the world, power. And, we're not starting on a fresh slate each day. So just like the power of the state, there's also the power of the market and the power of big business. And all business, is not the same. And therefore, one very important thing is I'd like to point to an interesting idea of multi-stakeholderism, which was enunciated by Net Mundial in 2014, not the 2024 one, but the 2014 one, which says that Internet governance should be built on democratic multi-stakeholder processes, ensuring the meaningful and accountable participation of all stakeholders. The respective roles and responsibilities of stakeholders should be interpreted in a flexible manner with reference to the issue under discussion. And what I think, therefore, is it's important to remember that multi-stakeholder is not one thing. Because, for instance, we can't change a monopoly market situation with stakeholder interventions. You need regulation. So the role of the state in regulation, for instance, you cannot run a community network with interference from the state. So you need communities. So I really think that it's extremely important to situate the idea of multi-stakeholderism in context. And without context, multi-stakeholderism is just an empty signifier.
Thanks, Anita. And I would just add one other thing that I think it's important. And I think the Net Mundial Sao Paulo guidelines also point this out. Stakeholder groups are not homogeneous. There's so much diversity between governments, within civil society. The private sector is enormously diverse. So I think that's the other thing that we also need to keep in mind. Okay, any last reflections on this topic? No, so you can sit down. I think a little bit more moving around would have been good, but we didn't have enough space. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating in this exercise. So everyone, while you take your seats, I hope everyone can still hear me. I now would like us to begin to think and unpack in a little bit more detail, more concretely, what we mean by coordinated implementation, follow-up, and review, and ways of approaching this that takes us from WSIS to GDC and maybe back to WSIS again. But however you see that. So the first question that I want to ask, and I'm going to ask not a specific panelist. The panelists can decide who wants to respond. But the first question is, where is this first question? And we at the IGF, we're part of the IGF process at the moment. How do you see the IGF, but concretely, supporting these important processes that took place in 2024? We have the Net Mondial +10, which produced these guidelines on how to deepen and strengthen multi-stakeholder processes within multilateral, intergovernmental spaces, but also in multi-stakeholder spaces. We had the Pact of the Future, and part of the Pact of the Future is obviously the Global Digital Compact, which gave us these quite high-level objectives and commitments, and highlight some of the new and emerging areas that we are facing in digital governance. So yes, anyone want to respond specifically how you see the IGF? I think there's probably a lot of consensus in this room that we want the IGF to be a key part of GDC follow-up and implementation, but some concrete suggestions about how that can be done. Any one of our speakers online or in the room that want to, Amrita, please go ahead. You take the first stab. And then I invite the other panelists to respond.
Thank you, Henriette. I'm taking a stab on behalf of the working group of MAG on IGF strengthening and strategy, because many of you are part of that group. So this group has been trying to work a bit on it, and we've as a community created a vision document for IGF. It's also there on the website. I'm not too sure where the link is. So there has been discussions on how the IGF can contribute not only to the GDC, but also ally with the WSIS, discussions and the others. so that in a coordinated way, the IGF can work. There are various steps which have been proposed in terms of action. For example, to formalize IGF's evolution, try to make the IGF model more strategic, and to also have, for example, a track where the implementation of GDC could be discussed in an open multi-stakeholder platform, because even the GDC document recognizes the IGF, the national regional IGFs, and its entire ecosystem. So that's one. Even the Sao Paulo guidelines actually talk about, the Net Mundial Plus 10 actually talks about IGF being the custodian to have more discussions on the implementation of many of these, how the multi-stakeholder process can be enhanced by different others who want to actually improve upon the processes, etc. Similarly, as I mentioned, the follow-up track of the GDC is something which is being spoken about, and how complementary relationship with the other WSIS partner institutions could be developed and strengthened. I would urge all of you to look at the vision document. I think the communities come up with fairly a good one, which is a bit more actionable. You are welcome to give more comments, and I'll leave it at that for now.
Amrita, and maybe just to take a step backwards and ask the panelists, and actually, if as many of you can respond to this as possible, when we talk about, Jason wants to speak. When we talk about this harmonizing of strategies for implementation and follow-up of the WSIS and GDC, what exactly is it actually that we're talking about? When we say there needs to be coordination, that we need to avoid duplication, what is it that we feel should be coordinated? There's so many different elements of this process. There's participation, there's implementation and planning, follow-up, collaboration, partnerships. There's also gathering evidence and research and identifying problems. So what do you think are the key processes where we need to facilitate a more harmonized approach? Jason, do you want to start off with that? I know you're speaking from a multi-stakeholder organization's perspective. Or do you want to respond to the IGF question? You're welcome to respond to the IGF question.
Yeah, thanks, Henriette. That's what I had actually raised or mentioned in the chat when you asked for comments on that. So maybe I'll touch on that, and maybe it helps segue to your second question. I think that so I want to build quite a bit on what Amrita was saying. I think that the Net Mundial document itself did a good job of identifying the importance of avoiding fragmentation and duplication of fora at a stage earlier this year before the GDC had been concluded. And I think a lot of what people had in mind at that moment was the GDC. And the GDC went through a number of rounds of evolution and negotiation, including opportunities for public comment. And thankfully, I think ended up in a place where some of what many in the stakeholder community saw as potential duplication was ironed out. And we ended up avoiding creating new forums and spaces, which is particularly important as the Net Mundial Sao Paulo principles and outcome document indicate, because of the challenges that stakeholders in particular, stakeholders from global majority, stakeholders coming from civil society have a lot of challenges from a resource perspective in tracking, engaging, traveling to, and participating in multiple processes simultaneously. And so I'm pleased that we were able to avoid some of that duplication at the end. But I think there are still many open questions about the extent to which the GDC and its follow-up will be efficiently coordinated with WSIS. And I think, as the Net Mundial principles noted, the IGF is probably one of the best ways in which to ensure that coordination, not just the annual IGF, but of course, the regional and national IGFs, which create sort of a continuing, existing, well-known set of spaces where a diverse range of stakeholders have proven to be able to come together to address a pretty wide range of important digital issues. So to me, the role of the IGF is really as a kind of ongoing mechanism for engagement. It's a flexible, the IGF doesn't have a narrow mandate by any means. So this sort of substance and focus of what is engaged, what stakeholders engage on in the IGF is very flexible. And I think the question for us, and this kind of leads you to your second question, is, so what specifically can and should we be focusing on? What are the tracks, whether using existing dynamic coalitions or thinking about new processes? The vision document is clearly an important piece of this puzzle. What are the specific things that we as part of the IGF community can now do to ensure that not only WSIS and the principles and objectives behind that process, but also the GDC continue to move forward in a coordinated and as participatory as possible manner. So, that all starts, I think, with the need to renew the mandate for the IGF, which is critical. And we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. That still has to happen. And of course, that happens in the context of the WSIS plus 20 review. And I think Jorge alluded to earlier the importance of resources, right? The IGF has done an incredible amount in terms of the number of people it's brought together, the number of conversations, the range of topics addressed with a fairly shoestring budget. And so if we're going to ask the IGF to bolster its role as this sort of interstitial tissue between these various processes around these topics, it needs to be resourced sufficiently and effectively.
Thanks a lot for that, Jason. Anita, I see you want to respond to my question about what it is, particularly, from in your case, from a civil society perspective, that you feel should be coordinated.
Thanks. I think the question has two parts. What should be coordinated and why? And I think you put it extremely succinctly. It's extremely complex, and therefore how to get to it should be guided by what's the imperative. So the imperative here is, and in our view, if I could, I would dare say on the behalf of some civil society organizations, the WSIS does remain in some ways, I think, the mother framework. And I do think that there is an abiding vision in WSIS, and maybe I'm a hopeless romantic, but when I see those mentions of people-centered information society, I think we have a long way to go. But the very fact that the global community could commit to it, today the what of coordination and harmonization is just grown exponentially. So we really need to look at the data and AI revolution. And that is why the GDC took a kind of a timely approach to flag the what. And I would say that updating the WSIS action lines, for instance, through ideas of standards for digital public goods. What are the common standards? What are the ethical standards? Also looking at private platform services and addressing the fragmentation of network standards, looking at democratic integrity and addressing hate speech, or looking at the data for development agenda and saying what are the rule-based arrangements for data sharing at a global, regional, national, and subnational levels to achieve the SDGs. These are some whats. But I think more important than the what for harmonization and coordination are two very important issues with the why. The first is, without coordination and without harmonization, we will not be able to realize the vision of equality and inclusion. And therefore, coordination is very, very important to address the inequity that the GDC recognizes is characteristic of the information society. And we do need, I think, to pay attention to this kind of inequity. And the second reason, I think, why we need to coordinate and harmonize is the inclusion, participation, and the rightful agency of civil society requires a renewed commitment at this conjuncture. And I think there, if I might say, the GDC falls short a little bit. It hasn't, been very vocal in its commitment or to renew its commitment to the participation of civil society. And here we need, I think, 21st century imagination of, and that's why we think of the WSIS and cherish the memories of 2003 and 5, because civil society said that, multilateralism in its old bottle will not do, right? So we need, I think, a truly transparent, democratic, accountable governance of digital technologies at all levels. And this is one of the reasons, and this is one of the whys for justifying increased coordination and harmonization. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks a lot, Anita. And I think it's fine to be a hopeless romantic about WSIS. I know of at least 3 WSIS relationships that are still going on, and 2 WSIS babies, as we used to refer to them. And they're now young adults. Jorge, you wanted to respond, and then David, I see you too. So let's hear what you feel we should focus on harmonizing and coordinating as part of this process from a government perspective and from a Jorge perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Henriette. So Jorge Cancia, Swiss government again. Maybe yes, a personal, but also a government perspective. I think if we are talking about babies, I would start to say the GDC actually is a baby of WSIS. So when did it start? Really at the IGF 2017 in Geneva, we had a discussion about updating digital cooperation. And then we had the high-level panel on digital cooperation. And finally, we had the GDC after some years, the pandemic and everything. As Anita said, the GDC gives some impulses on the what we have to do. So data governance, meaningful connectivity nowadays, human rights, artificial intelligence governance, so many things. And what is the role of the IGF in that game? So that was also part of the question. I would zoom out and say, the IGF, you cannot just talk about the IGF, because the IGF is part of the Swiss Army knife that is composed by the WSIS architecture. And the WSIS architecture are parts that are about mandates of organizations like the ITU, who have been under WSIS investing hundreds of millions into connectivity, into capacity building, into outreaching to many countries. It is the action lines, and there is also UNDP, UNESCO, all the UN organizations. You have the CSTD, which is the follow-up place where member states meet, but also stakeholders meet together and then give a feedback to the UN system in New York. We have the WSIS Forum, where we look every year where the action lines stand, where we can update things. And then we have the IGF, and the IGF, you have to see it in the context of that Swiss Army knife. And it is there to have an open discussion on equal footing, to identify emerging topics. That is completely valid today, I think. And what is especially needed, I think, is to avoid a proliferation of processes. So if you have a Swiss Army knife and something doesn't work, you try to improve it. You try to get the blade again, that it cuts properly, whatever. But you don't take another Swiss Army knife, and then you have two, and you don't know which one to use, and you spend your time in that. So I think it's time to use this impulse to update WSIS, but not only the IGF, the whole of the architecture. And there, I think the Sao Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines can give us inspiration, because it's not only about multi-stakeholder processes like the IGF or ICANN. It's also about more traditional multilateral processes where we can learn from the practice, the test bedding the IGF and other fora have been doing for 20 years. Thank you.
Hi, you can hear me? Great. David Fairchild, I'm first secretary at our mission in Geneva, one of the probably about a half dozen or more diplomats who cover horizontally digital issues. So I have a privilege of covering a number of UN and multilateral processes in the space. I'll try to be succinct so that we at least can move on to some other questions. And I've asked this question before. So what is the difference between WSIS in 2005, 2015, and 2025? And I think if you answer that to yourselves, I think you start to realize why the GDC exists. You can draw whatever answers you want away from it, but the GDC reflected the needs of some member states who felt that the WSIS or the architecture was missing the boat on certain areas. And so the negotiations of the GDC really reflects, unfortunately, yes, a multilateral process. I think we can all have a chin wag offline about how multi-stakeholder it was, but nevertheless, we were all at the table as member states and have, signed on to what is the GDC. So we can't go back in history and change it, whether we want to or not. But what I think is critical to understand is that there were member states who were actively undermining the IGF, actively undermining ICANN, actively undermining the internet governance model that exists today. You don't see that in the news. You won't see that in the final document. But I think if you talk to member states and they're willing to tell you a little bit more, what you didn't see was probably more important than what you saw as the final product, because what you did see in the negotiations was a clear differentiation of an ideological view of the future of the internet and how it should be governed, how the digital space needs to exist going forward. And I think that's kind of bringing me, I think that is one of the most critical things that people need to understand. It is not all, rose-colored glasses and status quo ante, and we just move along and renew and things will carry on as they are. I think the second point here is, as a like-minded Five Eyes G7 chair country, Canada needs to recognize that there are valid, needs that have been identified through the GDC that we need to take care of. And I think that's where the impetus to take a real serious look at the WSIS process, not necessarily talking about updating the action lines, but I think we need to see whether they're still fit for purpose and how they need to perhaps reflect some of the demands that have been coming forward. And the IGF, frankly, was under and remains under attack. I don't want to diminish the point nor amplify it too high. If you go and look at the UN General Assembly 79, the ICT for Development, that resolution that was just passed, there was a very minor voted change to diminish the language that was agreed in the GDC 6 weeks ago on how we refer to the IGF. They voted to, the G77 put forward a vote to diminish the word, to take out the word, the IGF as the primary multi-stakeholder forum. They voted to have the primary removed. So these are small data points, but if on an aggregation level seem to suggest that for whatever reason, there are certain countries, certain blocks who have a different view of what the IGF is or isn't and where it should go in the future. We tried to negotiate for the IGF to be stabilized and permanentized through the GDC. We were not successful. And so we are now in an inflection point is how do we, sort of resuscitate our efforts through the negotiations, but to carry this forward through 2025. And so I think, I'm trying to give you something new to play with so we don't just sort of hear the same old that we heard, and, from multiple workshops over the previous days. And so I think the other point we need to really pay attention to is how does the WSIS review and GDC implementation really play into the long game, which is 2030 and the SDG review. And I think if you go and look at the Pact of the Future, there are over 240 references in the Pact to development as a word search, which really suggests what is it that we really are trying to address. And I think what we are looking at is a convergence of, at a different time, digital ran on its own track, and there was the analog development world over on another track, and they ran in parallel. And we had the WSIS action lines, and the Millennium Development Goals, which became the Sustainable Development Goals. We are seeing a convergence. We are living now in a digitalized 21st century, and I think we really need to take a step back and look at the architecture. And yes, Canada does not believe that we need to duplicate We are looking for efficiency. And I think the system as it exists is more than capable. I mean, the IGF is a 20-year established and trusted environment. But there are member states who say, well, it only discusses internet governance. They seem to forget the second half of the same paragraphs from the Tunis agenda, which says the IGF is actually responsible for considering digital issues, so digital public policy issues. Every new issue can find a home in the IGF as long as we are willing to reconsider the existing language. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Valeria. I'm out of the Zoom, so can just tell me my Zoom disconnected. Does Jason want to react? Jason wants to react. Jason, do you want to react directly to David? Because I think Gitanjali wants to give her perspective, but go ahead, Jason. Let's hear from you first.
Yeah, no, I just put a comment in. I'll read it out loud for folks who can't see it, but just quick plus one to David's points that I think should really help us focus on the WSIS plus 20. I think there's perhaps a tendency with GDC and other things to sort of take our eye off the ball here. The WSIS 20 should be an opportunity not only to expand the mandate of the IGF, but to strengthen that mandate and strengthen the institution of the IGF, but that's not guaranteed, right? That is going to depend on the conversations and the negotiations that happen this year. And I think we need to kind of redouble our focus on that because if we don't, there is a chance, as David alluded to, there are some who I think would push for the IGF to be weakened. And I think that would take us in the wrong direction. So I just wanted to kind of foot stomp on that point quickly and hand it back to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. But I think I also heard David say, and maybe I didn't hear correctly, but that this is not, when we talk about the what, to use Anita's framing, the what is not just the IGF. There's a bigger what and a longer term what out there as well. And it also sounds to me, David, from what you're saying, that a big part of the what is building the kind of commonality and collaboration that WSIS did manage to achieve between North and South. And between the developed and the developing world. I mean, and it does, and I think it's wise of you to have reminded us that things are more fragmented in some ways. But Gitanjali, you work in the IT, you're part of the WSIS process, and you work in the UN system itself. From your perspective, what is the most important what and why?
Thank you, Anirudh. In fact, WSIS for us has been really the UN in action in terms of digital cooperation, the beautiful framework of WSIS action lines that we implement based on our mandates. Like WHO has e-health, ILO has e-employment, UNESCO has mostly the knowledge societies one. So it's a beautiful framework that all UN agencies are working together to implement. So to strengthen Anita's point, we should really build on this framework and the strength that we have. And it's really not true that the action lines are very outdated, because if you look at the WSIS forum page, you will see that the WSIS action lines are being updated in terms of like the emerging trends, the opportunities and challenges every year by the UN agencies involved. So you can see very, very beautiful presentations on the evolution of the context of each action line and what are the emerging trends. So you can have a look at it online. Also, in terms of the existing mechanisms, we really feel, and ITO has been saying this, Doreen said it a couple of times, WSIS Forum and IGF are really the successes of the WSIS, where multi-stakeholders have got the platform to voice their opinions and to be part of the UN process. So really, the WSIS review gives us an opportunity to look at it. And from the UN perspective, the interagency mechanism of the UN called UNGIS, the United Nations Group on Information Society, that's really an effective mechanism, and that should be built on and used by the UN system. So we have rotational chairpersonship of ITU, UNESCO, UNDP, and UNCTAD, along with the regional commissions and more than 35 members of the chief executive boards. So the frameworks and the systems are all in place, and we should definitely utilize them. The other thing that brought back memories in the previous session is again what you and Anita have been talking about, that we have built this community to this point that now we are talking about things like emerging technologies like AI. But where did we start? In 2006, 2007. We really have to remember that effort, especially by civil society, the open source movement, the indigenous languages, the cultural aspects that UNESCO has been doing. With IDRC, we actually set up these telecenters in India, in the villages in India, where we were looking at how telecenters, post offices could be converted into telecenters where they could provide e-governance services. Distance learning was a revolution in so many countries where young girls could actually study because of distance education. So we really need to also think of what we have achieved, like on the ground, all of us who've been working together so hard for all these years. And of course, we've evolved from all of those technologies to now we are talking about AI, Meta, new emerging technologies. But we really need to think about those challenges that we faced and overcame as well. The community radio stations, Anita will know about them, that we built in villages that provided information to the villagers. So we've come a long way, and we must commend the community for that as well.
Thanks a lot for that, Gitanjali. And I think the sad thing is that we've come a long way, but also when it comes to digital inclusion, we've not come nearly far enough. And many of those challenges still remain. We've now got less than 10 minutes left. And I'm going to ask, I'm going to take just 2 inputs from the audience very briefly. And then I'm going to ask the panel to share their closing comments with them. So I see a hand there. Juan, anyone else who wants to comment from the audience? No. So Nigel, so you have to be very brief because we've got 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes left. So a bite-sized comment.
Yes, I don't want to repeat many things that have been said. So I will concentrate on, if we want to coordinate, go back to there, we need to focus that each process should focus in their unique characteristic. The WSIS forum should focus in their unique characteristic. The IGF should focus in its unique characteristic. I'm not going into that now because we don't have time, but which in order to be efficient with what was from WSIS, the framework for WSIS, we have it to get it to make it efficient and each one to what it has, including the intergovernmental process in the CSTD. If each one focus in their own characteristic without duplicating, then they will need to create the communicating links between all them and in order to be efficient.
Nigel?
Yes, thank you. I'm being heard? Okay. Yeah, Nigel Casimir from the CTU again. I'm just wondering if the IGF could be whether primary multi-stakeholder or just multi-stakeholder gathering, whatever, could be the multi-stakeholder place where we develop targets for the implementation of the GDC. The GDC is kind of high-level stuff, and maybe in this multi-stakeholder space, we could identify what are some of the specific things we want to see done under the GDC by a particular time. So we develop some performance targets for it.
Thanks a lot for that, Nigel. So, it feels to me that we actually needed much more time with the session, but I think many sessions feel like that. I mean, just to close us and maybe to pave the way for further work, I want to ask each of the panelists to firstly, do you think that the IGF should change its name to the Digital Cooperation Forum, and just a yes/no response. But then what I want you to close with is, what are your fears and your hopes for this process of harmonizing GDC and WSIS implementation? I want you to start with your fear. Can you still hear me? Good. Start with your fear and end with a hope. So let's start with our online speakers. Jason, why don't you go first? Change the name or not? Yes, no. Your fear and your hope.
No. And my fear is, I think that the IGF, as we've talked about, it depends on, its strength is drawn from the broad and diverse range of stakeholders who are able to participate in it across the international IGF event, but also the national and regional ones, and all of the interstitial work, intersessional work. So hosting the IGF in countries where journalists, Wikipedia editors, women, LGBTQ people are systematically discriminated against or harassed, that works directly counter to that strength. It weakens the IGF. And it is, I don't think, unintentional by any means. So that is a fear that I have, that the IGF will continue to be co-opted, will be diluted. And I think we need to acknowledge that that is happening, acknowledge that there are countries that are working against the IGF, its mandate renewal and extension, and efforts to strengthen it. My hope is that we, the multi-stakeholder community that support the IGF, can resist that, can push back on that. I think that's going to take a lot of work, but I'm encouraged by the Net Mundial process, encouraged by sessions like this one, encouraged by all of the incredible work that people in this room virtually and in person do. And I hope we can continue to work together, even if we don't always agree on every topic, to support and strengthen the IGF going forward.
Thanks, Jason. Anita.
Thank you. My answer is I don't know. I mean, I'm ambivalent about the name. What's in a name? But I want to actually answer your question about fear and hope by also responding to our esteemed contributor from the Government of Canada. I think that for civil society, we are caught at a moment politically at this point in time between very, very scary geopolitics and greedy geoeconomics. It's really frightening, I think. And therefore, somebody said, we are not in an epoch of neoliberalism, as so many social movements have fought against neoliberalism. Today, we are caught in neo-illiberalism. So we have the worst of both, right? We have illiberal politics and we have the greed of corporations. So in my view, I would like a better understanding among nation states, better understanding among peoples. And like Jorge said, I think regardless of whether it's good practices in multi-stakeholderism or good practices in other fora, like the Biodiversity Convention, which has benefit sharing mechanisms with communities, with indigenous peoples, we really need to look at international solidarity as a unifying principle. And I'm not the first one to speak about it. And I really, really think that we should go beyond narrow blocks. And I'm quite happy to question the G77 and my own government for a healthy politics, So at some level, I think that we need to understand why people are doing what they are doing and what they're trying to protect, right? In an AI economy where most people are left behind. So we reject bad politics and we reject very poor economics. What we really want is a solidarity vision of interdependence and mutual reciprocity. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. Amrita.
Agree to what Anita mentioned and even Jason mentioned, and what you were saying. There are gaps which needs to be addressed, not necessarily creating new structures. And what Gitanjali mentioned, we need to also sometimes look back and see the reach we have currently. If you look at the IGF and its structure, it's huge. If you're saying the IGF is not working on new things, look at what, for example, the Policy Network on AI or internet fragmentation is doing. The challenge today is when the reports come out, Who is viewing it? Is it going to the necessary governments to see that they also reflect? Like the policy, PNAI is working mostly on developing nations, sustainability, labor wages, which are critical things for developing countries. Are the messages going? There have been many things which have come up from many of the meetings to strengthen the IGF, but have they really been implemented? Obviously, the leadership panel did come in, the multi-year themes have come in, but how much more has it been used by the member states? I think that's also important. There are gaps, but many things are being cribbed about. You can use these platforms. So I would say use existing resources, and I'll leave it at that.
Thanks a lot. David.
I'll be very quick because I saw you got the
We'll
2
be
minutes.
done in 3 minutes, so
Yes.
you can relax.
Okay. I'm agnostic to the name. I think it's what color the cat is and whether it catches my statement. My fear is that we're witnessing a centralization and a New Yorkification, which in some parts is justified for the multilateral system, but is being done at the detriment of the existing system. And I'll leave it there. Because I think what we're suffering from is from a collective proximity bias. It's like, what have you done for me lately, as opposed to what has WSIS done over 20 years? And I think my hope I'll leave with is sort of like that we wake up in time to sort of realize that the IGF actually does serve the entire community. But, and in that is, in fact, one of our positions is by stabilizing the funding and stabilizing the IGF, we can actually bring it to where the voices need to be heard. I mean, this is a very homogenous community at the IGF, and we struggle every year to bring the different voices, the different opinions around the table, because that's, you can't make a pearl without sand.
Thanks, David.
And Red, I'll just share the hope that, ITU as a UN agency, specialized agency on digital, we stand ready to support, provide our secretariat support to all, not only to member states, but, we have sector membership, academia. So we are there to support and to ensure that there is the process going forward is multi-stakeholder and, that in the vision of WSIS beyond 2025, we do see some of these strengthened foundations of WSIS.
Thank you, Henriette. So to the brand, I think the IGF is already, has been for many years, the Digital Cooperation or Governance Forum. If the rebranding is good for branding purposes, let's be open about it. My fear is that the entire WSIS system or the UN system doesn't deliver on the promises, on really having a digital presence where nobody is left out. And one fear there is that this proliferation of processes of fora makes the inclusivity and the work more difficult. And the hope is really the creativity of this and many other communities in being able to find solutions together. And I think that with that creativity that we've witnessed many times here in the IGF, we are able to update the global architecture, which is just a means to deliver on the goals we want to have a digital fair present and future.
Thanks very much, Jorge. And I'm really sorry that we ran a bit over time. And I think, if there's one key takeaway here is that there's a lot more to be said about the what. And I think also about the how. But I think the one key takeaway for me from your inputs in this session, and Valeria, I lost my Zoom connection, so apologize. I want to apologize to online comments that we've not included. But I think the lesson here is that even after 20 years, more if we add Geneva, of WSIS implementation, we're still grappling with issues of power, with issues of inclusion, with delivery and implementation. We recognize the strengths of the multi-stakeholder approach. We recognize its weaknesses. And I think we do see the IGF as a place where we can address that. And we see Net Mundial as one of the tools we can use. But I think so for me, the tech, any new process that's trying to set up and enter this arena of digital cooperation really needs to keep in mind the complexity. And can we really afford to start new processes, which after 20 years will be at this moment of learning and realization and solidarity and lack of solidarity that we are at now? We really can do better, I think. So let's continue and let's use our WSIS and our IGF processes to do this. So thanks very much, everyone, for your participation, and thanks to everyone in the room. And thanks to our tech people, apologies. Thanks very much to Jason and Anita and all the online participants.
Thank you, Henriette. Thank you, Bruna. Thank you, Valeria.
Perfect. Wil jij er zo in of niet?
Oh. Kijk. Ja. Of die eruit? Nou, ik denk. ehm, ja. Pin. Allow to. Ja. Hmm.
Eigenlijk dan.
Ah, ja, top. Okay. Good.
And can you hear us? Also online?
Nee?
Nee? Op 5? Channel 5.
Uh, no. Do you hear me?
Juliana, can you hear me online?
Yes, I can.
Oh, excellent. And we hear you. Perfect. Thank you.
Great.
Test. Wait, dan moet ik.
Hear you. Channel 5. Channel 5. Hi. Can you hear us now? Yes. Excellent.
Can you hear us? Yes. So thank you very much all for joining this session. My name is Auke Pals. I work for KPMG. And we're here today in the AI regulation unveiled session. What we're trying to do in this session is exploring AI regulation, and also we're trying to interact with you as much as possible in this session, so we can gather also your views on AI regulation and policy making worldwide. I'm here not alone. I'm here next to me is Lisa Vermeer. Welcome. Juliana is joining us online. Welcome as well. And Atmanda is here also next to me in the room. Welcome all. Can I give you the floor, Lisa, to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Lisa Vermeer. I work at the Ministry of Economic Affairs in the Netherlands, and one of my main jobs is to implement the European AI Act in the Netherlands. I leave it at that, right?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ananda Gautam. I'm from Nepal. I work with Open Internet Nepal, and I belong to civil society community. I work in capacity building of young people and making internet more transparent, inclusive, and sustainable. Thank you.
Juliana, can I give you the floor as well?
Yes, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So thank you so much. I am Juliana Sakai. I'm the Executive Director of Transparency Brazil, which is an independent NGO devoting to promote more transparency and accountability under the Brazilian government. And this is also includes the government's use of AI. So we have been monitoring and working on how the Brazilian government is deploying, development, and using AI and producing recommendations on these fields, and parallelly also monitoring how our AI regulation is being discussed in the Congress right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is our panel for today. But we're here today in an interactive session. So I would encourage you all to join and join the discussion once we're there. But at first, I would like you to participate in a vote. So you can scan the QR code or go to kpmgvote.nl and log in with the code IGF 2024. So as a starter, would like to introduce to you the global impact of European AI regulations. And for this, I would like to give the floor to Lisa.
Thank you so much. Well, this policy question, I would like to start first with doing the poll online, and then we can see what gets out of it. So let's see if it works. So the question is, do you believe that the EU AI Act will become the de facto global standard for AI governance? Because it's always claimed that it's one of the first comprehensive AI laws in the world. There are many other laws, but the question is, will it become the global standard? So what do you think? Is it yes or no? Or do you have actually no idea what AI is about? It's also possible.
We do have 6 votes in already.
Don't be afraid to just choose something, although you may have a nuanced opinion.
I'm looking at the room. I guess most of them voted right now. So let's go to the results.
Interesting. So everyone knows what the EU AI Act is. That's a good thing to know. It's 55% yes and 44% no. Well, slight preference for yes or no. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your perspectives on how this would work. So for this session, I would like to share my thoughts about why it can be yes and why it can be no, and what is, in my perspective, a challenge for all of us. So if you look at the European AI Act, it's product safety. So the idea is that all AI systems that enter the market in the EU, in the whole European Union, you can assume that they are safe, because the AI Act gets all the requirements together for risky AI, several types of risky AI, and if the AI system is in one of these categories, it has to meet certain requirements before it can be sold or before it can be used in the EU by the private sector, by the public sector, by basically everyone. So that means that for lots of AI systems, there will be requirements that make it actually safer. And then safety, you can look at it for it's that may come with AI on these areas will be tackled by all AI systems before they enter the market. At least that's the premise of the law. So that means that these systems, when they are made by European companies, by companies all across the world, if they are made for the European markets, they will be safe enough and meeting all the requirements, which may have and is presumed to have the impact that lots of companies will build one type of AI systems to sell everywhere. Because of the EU's requirements, they will build a system, for example, for the health sector to use in a hospital, and then they will meet the requirements for the AI Act, sell it in Europe, and then also other areas of the world will benefit from the fact that this AI is meeting the requirements. Also, when it's sold in, for example, a hospital in Nepal or any other area in the world. So for a whole range of topics, that is going to be the case. And that makes me expect that there's some kind of, you can say yes, because it will set the standards, and then it will be the standard for lots of AI across the world. But there's a whole area of risky areas in the AI Act where it may be a bit difficult to say whether in the future the requirements for the AI will really be adopted. For example, if you look at critical infrastructure or of biometrics AI, they will be regulated, but it's pretty, we can expect that some companies will build multiple products. So they will make the safest products for the EU, but then also build other products that do not meet the same, for example, data safety requirements or other requirements, and then they sell it in the rest of the world. You see that happening a lot. And yeah, so it depends on the incentive for the company, whether they are going to make one product for the whole world or just one that is super secure for the EU. That's why the yes is maybe a bit limited in the end. So I also say there is very much a case for no as an answer, because the EU is a very specific area in the world in terms of regulation. There's already a lot of regulation has been adopted for the digital economy and for personal data, for example, with the GDPR and also the Data Act. And there's really a very dense regulatory field, which may not is very different than the regulatory ecosystem in other areas of the world. For example, big areas like India or maybe Brazil, like Guyana, it's very different. The legal context basically where a law can be adopted, and that's why the AI Act's design may not be suitable for other areas of the world to replicate. And also the making product regulation is a very old way of regulating the markets. There's lots of product regulation in the EU, but it may not be the approach in other areas of the world, why it's not that easy to replicate. And then another challenge that I wanted to share with you is that the AI Act enforcement promises to be really challenging, because the AI Act is very broad and it sets rules for different areas, a whole range of areas, basically touching all industries and all public areas. And how do you effectively enforce a law? How do you make sure that the regulators, not policy and lawmakers like myself, but the regulators that are going to do the oversight of the law really are able to work with it and make sure that people and companies and organizations abide by the law? So already in the EU, this is a major challenge, and it's something that I'm really working on a lot and like wrapping my head around. And I think that is also the case in lots of other areas in the world, why it may be quite difficult to have a law like the AI Act in other areas, because how do you enforce a law which is so broad, and that creates uncertainty? So yeah, I think I leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So I hope at this point the EU AI Act could steer us in the right direction, and hopefully could be adapted once we learn how to make use of it. But that's also part of the market, I guess, and also a part of the standardization bodies that that are involved in making standards for AI, which is also the bridge to the next policy question. So this policy question is about the actions for international standardization bodies. Currently, there are loads of standardization bodies trying to get involved in the AI standardization. But we also see some challenges for those global standardization bodies. And now again, a question for you all. What are the biggest challenges for global standardization of AI? So I would like to encourage you to vote again, and the answers will be on the screen. I'll give you some time to grab your phone or log in at this page. So scoping indeed. So what do we consider AI? Find experts, achieve consensus, compatibility, translate fundamental rights to technical standards, finding common ground, different views on the existence of human beings, AI staying or just the next blockchain hype, also interesting. Capacity of experts, local context, trust. Tough question. Universal concept, understanding that AI replicates traits of the mind and persons integrate ethical and human rights standard language models. So, so we'll move on to the next one. So really interesting challenges, and I really think those are all true, to be honest. And we are indeed maybe in the early stage of AI and AI standardization. So currently, a lot of standardization bodies are active in the field of trying to come up with standards, ethical guidelines, technical standards. However, what we also see is that those standards are quite fragmented. All different kinds of standardization bodies are trying to deal with AI in their own certain way. And currently, we indeed see maybe it's a. I don't think it's a hype, so I don't believe in being the next blockchain hype. So as one of the participants you just mentioned. However, what I do see is that there is quite some overlap between standardization bodies and initiatives trying to make a standard according to their best practices. And that also comes to the second point I was trying to make, and that's the sector specific complexity. So what I do see in my work is that some standards are being created are quite generic, and those might be applicable for all kinds of AI use cases. However, some sectors do really want to get a more steering on how to make use of those standards. So, for instance, in healthcare, does require way different standards than the mobility industry for autonomous cars, or the defense industry does also require different standards, and they might even um, yeah, not publicly shared. My third point is that there are really cultural and regulatory diversities. So Lisa just mentioned the EU AI Act, which is applicable in the EU and for EU inhabitants. And that's according to the EU way of thinking. While we create ethical standards or ethical guidelines in one of the standardization bodies, that might really differ where those guidelines are created, which can contribute to a good debate, which we might be able to have in the future on a global scale as well. My fourth point is, how can we balance this? So balancing between regulation, standardization, and innovation. So it was mentioned in a different session that I attended today, is how can we make also a balance between the regulation side of AI initiatives and innovation. So a small startup is not the first one to be looking at as industry standard, for instance. They'll just create according to their best practices and their way of working, which or regulation could hinder those startups in being innovative. And my last point is the dynamic technology landscape. What we did see in regulation is when the EU AI Act was being developed, generative AI was not not that big in the beginning, but later on in the final stages of the negotiation, it became quite big, and there was an urge and a need to regulate that. That's the same with standardization. Also, standardization takes a lot of time and is actually at the end created on the basis of what works the best. And with a sector that's being really innovative and really trying to take all the newest technologies available, this might be a challenge for standardization on global scale. And with this, I would like to conclude my introduction remarks, and would like to give the floor to Juliana.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. So we have right now the policy question 3 with the theme enhancing enforcement through civil society. And I would like you to answer, in your opinion, what is the most significant role civil society can play in AI governance? Please share with us your thoughts.
Now log in, share your opinion.
So it's coming right now. Monitor the government. Awareness. Don't think in problems, think in solutions. Capacity building. Advocacy. Vote for parties that have good plans. Voice concerns. As user of public services, it's important to have a vote with consultants, democratic control. Reserve the potential impacts of AI system, defending and protecting values and public interest in facilitating dialogue, agenda setting, participate in standardization process, monitor the government. So we're back again. So thank you for sharing so much, make the minority heard. Yeah. So I would like to, as a member of civil society, talk a little bit about the context we are now under the regulation of AI coming. But I would like to share, I would like to split 2 different contexts. So one is the context in which specific AI regulations are currently being implemented, like the EU, for example, or being directly affected, like the US, like Lisa mentioned. So the producers, the tech companies that are selling, so to say, AI system to the European Union will have to comply with the EU legislation. And the other context is where it's like Brazil, for example, we don't really sell products to EU, not massively technologically. So let's say the global majority that is not being affected directly, at least, by the legislations, but might have experience an indirect influence. So, but let's begin where AI regulations are currently being implemented. Now, so as the new legislation, the civil society, watching a new legislation being implemented, the civil society has a huge role in shaping its enforcement. So since identify what are the problems, where implementation is not working and why, and advocate for institutions to take measures. So, but in order to do all these assessments, understand what is working and why it's not working, and then at the end, present these problems to society and to the institutions, we have to have like real transparency. So one thing is being able to assess information both from the government and the companies to understand what is working and what is not working. And so once we secure a list of transparency, then we can at the end really do like the report analysis and so on, and all the advocacy work. And the second environment is like I mentioned, where we don't have a specific AI framework nor like sell products to the EU. And I want to share like a little bit of Brazilian experience and civil society experience so far on AI governance without having a specific framework for this. So I think that the first thing we have to think about is really to understand what is the legal framework, the current existing legal framework that can actually protect rights in the context of AI use. And in Brazil, for example, we have consumers' rights and the general data protection. And both of them have been used even to avoid the abuse of some of the use of some tools, especially the facial recognition systems. And civil society, from this point, can present like complaints to Brazilian institutions, where, for example, the IDEC, which is the Institute for Consumer Protection in Brazil, has filed administrative and judicial procedures against the use of these tools in different scenarios. And for example, when the São Paulo's subway started to using it for marketing and advertising purposes and collecting information on the reaction of people watching it, and also in the clothing stores, where they were also recording and capturing information of through facial recognition systems. And in both cases, we have an absolute no consent of the consumer. So under this situation, the Institute for Consumers Protections won the case both in judicial and also in administrative sphere, and so that the metro and this clothing store stopped using. So I think this is more or less just what I wanted to try to start the conversations and make sure that even in the context where we do not have a specific AU frame and a specific AI framework, we still have a lot to work on the governance of these AI systems. And just to close it, We are currently actually discussing, as I mentioned in the Congress, our AI bill, and the risk approach framework has also been discussed there. So this is also where we, at the end of the day, civil society is also fighting for protecting its right on a more specific way under the use of AI systems.
Thank you very much for your great intro. And yeah, we really see the importance of civil society being active in this. So it's great that you and your organization is being part of that. Before we move on, I'd like to look at the chat as well. We saw. Oh, okay. We'll do that after the next speaker. And I'll share my screen again. So then I'm giving the floor to Ananda.
Thank you so much for describing the role of civil society. I think Juliana has started doing that. So I'll be discussing from the global south perspective, maybe how we have been starting the discussion saying, will EU AI Act be a de facto regulation for AI? And I think it is the most comprehensive legislation that is existing today. And another kind of thing is it's extraterritorial jurisdiction, which means that it can regulate AI products and services that are outside of EU as well. So in the context of developing nations and on the context of human rights. So the basic fundamental of AI system that we talk is about the quality of the data and the bias of the data. So looking from that perspective, there are two things that need to be considered. One is social thing, another is technological thing. So the fundamental data, quality of data is what makes or what trains the algorithm of the AI. So in the developing nations, we strive to get there are many challenges, we are talking about AI governance, but there still exists digital divide. And we are also talking about AI divide now. So there are still, in global south, if we see, there are still more than 2 billion people who don't have access to internet itself. And then the data standards, quality, the collection of data, I think that is very challenging. And without the standard data, it is very challenging to make the AI models. It might create bias, or it might not be as efficient as it was seemed to be. Another is technological, that in the developing nations, they lack the capacity to actually either implement it or build the models. Or if we talk about the policy legislations, they also lack the capacity to build their own legislations. And after the EU AI Act, many countries are trying to get their legislations, but they don't do it correctly because they don't have that capacity. So how do we develop their capacity is one thing. And another is we are talking about how it can be leveraged in developing nations. It is, if used correctly, maybe we can use it to close the digital divide. Maybe we can use it to empower the population that does not have as equal digital literacy as a person living in New York or somewhere in the EU region, where the digital literacy is no more a problem, or access to internet is no more a problem, or access to technology is not a problem. When we come to developing nations, there are many other access as well. There's a language barrier. AI models cannot work in the native languages still. If we want to train them. We don't have enough data. And if they are trained using the publicly available data, there are other consequences of copyright and other kind of things. And this makes the development of AI a bit complex. But if uh, the developed nation help those countries to build the capacity, maybe this developing nation can leverage the power of AI to actually complement the issues that we have been facing, to complement giving them access to technologies, making systems more accessible in terms of language or any other barriers that we have. We might be able to even complement it in having medical facilities in the rural areas, or like um, enhancing the education system by implementing the AI system in the education. We can create teachers, virtual teachers who can interact with them, or like personalized tutor can be implemented. Or there are many kind of cases where AI could be leveraged in developing nations. But like we have to be very mindful that these kind of considerations are made, that um, it is a global debate. How do we make AI system more responsible? And that should be both societal and then like technological. If there are already biases in the society, AI algorithm will definitely be biased. Until and unless the bias in the society is eliminated, I think because it is based on the data that is available in the society. It is the data that we have created. So we have to be very mindful what we feed the AI system. That is very important. And if we do that from a, because there is one thing in the AI ecosystem that developing nation didn't have. Like during the 2000 .com boom, developing nation couldn't leverage the power of internet like the developed nation could do, that we are telling today. But AI is in a very premature phase, and if we could accommodate the needs of those developing nations and then leverage the AI, I think we can make them way more prosperous in terms of economy, in terms of other social benefits. I would like to stop here. I think we have to go for a discussion and then like.
Yes, we have the poll here.
Thank you, sir.
So the question is, does the AI Act give possibilities of leveraging AI in developing nations while upholding human rights? No, not by itself. Yes. I don't think so. Human rights is not globally enforceable. Yes, as a guide to develop local regulatory frameworks. Possibly on the contrary. Yes, global organizations, I think, are being developed, influenced, being inspirational only to European companies operating elsewhere. No, not by itself. Is anyone in the panel wants to reject on the?
They're rotating, right?
Yeah.
I think there is something about global East and Americas will commit. So my response would be, it is like AI Act itself cannot be leveraged to upholding the human rights, because it will be more focused on what can be done and what can't be done, because legislations are always focused on do's and don'ts of something. But if we have rather policies that will accommodate the development of AI, or how other nations, or like the extraterritorial jurisdiction might also be how developed nation can help the developing nations to actually leverage this, can be one of the options. Another is to uphold the human rights. There are various frameworks. UNESCO has one, and then OECD is working on their second iteration. So those kind of frameworks could be one of the fundamental practices that could uh, help on ensuring the human rights, not in only developing context, but in the global context.
Thank you.
Yeah, some questions. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we plan to have like breakout discussions, but given the fact that it's already 5:45, we have until 6 o'clock. And we thought let's just do plenary, take questions from the floor, and then also from the online participants. Maybe first the question that was asked in the chat. It was about Gaza being a test ground for using AI, which I think is very urgent and has been quite shocking. Thanks, Elisa. To see that. So I'm taking the question from the chat about Gaza being the testing ground for several sorts of AI. It's rather difficult to answer this question because there's a lot of nuance about it. So let me first say that the AI Act in the EU is, of course, an initiative to try to make AI more responsible and to avoid AI systems globally that really pose lots of risks to, for example, safety and fundamental rights of people. But the AI Act is not touching all AI systems. So the context of it is that there's also a discussion about, for example, AI in the military domain, and also military domain and defense and national security is excluded from the AI Act. But that does not mean that there's no ongoing discussion about these areas. Even rather more so, there's been a long discussion already, especially on the international level, for example, about the responsible use of AI in the military domain, also initiated by the Netherlands. It's called the Re-aim trajectory. And you also have a long mainly Geneva-based conversation about lethal autonomous weapons. Of course, that means that Gaza was there was still a lot of AI was used there, and I'm afraid, that's my personal opinion, I'm afraid that AI will be used for very bad purposes. But the discussion about how to tackle this, how to disincentivize this, how to make this impossible is really on the table, very straightforward. It's being discussed between stakeholders, between governments in UN bodies. So it gives some hope that it's on the table and that there may be change. But that's we are. That's where we are now.
Thank you, Lisa, for answering the question from the chat. Which is also a really urgent topic indeed. I would also like to ask a question to the audience, because in the audience I do see some people involved also in internet standards. And my question to the audience is what can we learn in the creation of standards for AI from the internet standardization process? So can I give someone the floor from the audience?
Yeah, I can say something about it. My name is Wouter Kobus. I'm with the platform Internet Standards. In my perspective, there's quite a difference where the internet itself was built on standards. And I think these standards really formed the internet as we know it right now. Whereas AI, although not my expertise, seems more to me as a technology is out there, and now we're trying to introduce standards to, well, limit or to control AI in that sense. But it's not really founded on standards like the internet was. So there is something to learn, but I think that's a difference between AI and internet standards in that sense.
Thank you, Wouter, for sharing your thoughts. What my reflection on that is that indeed AI is not built on standards, but indeed is now being regulated while the threats have been identified or have been more upfront. So now we're trying to re-engineer the wheel for creating usable standards in certain domains. Is there any other reflection from the audience? Yeah, let's move to the slides.
I have a question connecting to balancing innovation and control. So I think it's for you, Auke. Do you think that there is a risk that big tech says no to the EU? And if so, what can be changed to balance our vision in the EU and the vision of big tech?
Let me think about it. There is indeed a risk that big tech says no to EU, and I do think that in not only in AI but in also other topics, the EU is being challenged by big tech. So your question is what changed to balance our vision in the EU beginning at big tech? To be honest, I don't think I have a clear answer on that. So maybe some of my other colleagues do have that.
Yeah, you see this happening because especially I think Meta is at the moment really ramping up against the AI Act and its consequences. For example, the AI Act is regulating large language models or general purpose AI models, which comprise large language models with the code of practice. And most large companies from the US have signed up with the AI Pact. It's an initiative from the European Commission to collaborate with companies to become compliant with the AI Act. But we now see that especially Meta, but also other companies are replying to this code of practice on GPA models, which are the large language models, and some are more constructive and others are really saying we don't want this because this is going to make it very hard for us. So I get this question a lot, especially during the negotiations of the AI Act. Basically, all countries were asked, like, how do you see the AI Act as a barrier to innovation? The idea is that the AI Act is not a barrier to the right kind of innovation. And because it's a risk-oriented approach, it means that a lot of AI falls outside of the scope of AI Act. But to be honest, a lot of AI also falls within the scope. But then the argument is that the EU deliberately choose to have a certain, we want responsible AI to develop and to innovate and to grow and to scale in the EU. And if large companies, for example, from the US, but also from other areas in the world, they are not responsible enough, i.e. not meeting our EU criteria, it's the kind of AI that we don't want. So it is a balance, but if the big tech says no to the EU, then the EU says no to the big tech. And it really means, do you want to have access to our market or not? And I think you see the upcoming coming of years will be interesting to see how it goes, because we have a new European Commission in Brussels, and they have quite some enforcement power also for the Digital Services Act, which is a large law impacting large platforms. And with the AI Act in almost a year, how will they play their cards? Now, we first had the Commissioner Thierry Breton, who was really individual and forceful towards, for example, Elon Musk. Now you see that the new commissioner has a more conciliatory tone towards the ex-owner. So it really depends on how this the law is there, but it depends on how it's going to work out and how forceful the EU is going to stand and develop the fines, etc. But it remains to be seen. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Lisa, for also answering the question. I saw the hand raised from Karen online. Karen, are you there? I can unmute you.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I was writing my concern or on the chat. So I think that the difference, for example, with internet, is that AI is not limited to bring or give information or grant information. The information that it gives, it's biased already. Another concern is that it also replicates and improves human traits. It also interprets data, for example, when it's used on medical devices or neurotechnological devices. It will read this information, it will evaluate it, and then it will interpret this data, and then it will give feedback to this neurotechnology as well. I'm talking about, for example, these electroencephalography devices that will read, then it will interpret, and then it will send signs again to this neurotechnology to either activate or suppress some activity on the brain. And it is not regulated from the design, the development, or use. It is not regulated how it will be transnationally moved. So I think we have a lot of concerns. So it's a broader concern because it affects many dimensions, many fields. And I do think that society does not fully understand the profound impact of using and interacting with AI. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Yeah, Juliana, do you want to reply on that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your comments. I think that we have been always following what are the technological development and advancements, so to say. And I think this is really the place where civil society plays a big role, like trying to explaining what is going on, putting more information available, and make it. And when I say putting more information, is also like breaking what are these consequences that you just mentioned, right, Karen? So for each kind of use in each field, we have to have like civil society monitoring how the results are going on, and how the implementation are going on, how the test of each system is working. And I think that this is something that has to be parallel developed, sometimes with the help of the government. It has to, when we talk about a impact assessment, it has to be prior to a launch of a tool. And when it's launched, civil society may have the information and the data to collect and to analyze what kind of impact and algorithmic bias, for example, some tool is provoking, and how it might impact badly on inequality. So I think that this is pretty much the field that we have to work on for, at the end of the day, the civil society, the population, the consumers, the users as a whole have more info on how we should protect ourselves, right? And for this, also the organized civil society and academia and journalists are there to spread the information and support all the advocacy work. And this is really important because at the end of the day, the institutions are accountable once also if the civil society is demanding. So there is a flux and a kind of civil society demanding and the institutions answering to this. So we have to press and demand that the institution takes the action, the measures to protect and to implement the regulations that are being proposed.
Thank you very much for your response. I'm getting the sign already that the session is nearly to its end. I would like to give the opportunity for someone to reflect or make any last comment. If there is none, I would like to thank my panelists, Lisa, Ananda, Juliana, for being part of the session. I do also really think that much discussion can go on this topic, but not within the 60 minutes that we've received today. And with this, I would really encourage you to stay in touch with us through LinkedIn. Add us if you need us or want to start a new discussion. And with this, I would like to close the session. Thank you very much. Yeah. Eh?
Thank you, Juliana and Manon.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Ja. Ja, dat is echt zo voorbij.
Ja.
Dat gaat het snel voorbij.
Ja.
Ja.
Zelf een beetje echt gewoon niet vragen te iets meer moeten zelf introduceren en iets vertellen. Ik vergeet dat heel vaak. Ja. Dan ben ik al bezig en dat ik allemaal heel erg ben.
Nee, maar dat als we daarvoor wel een beetje staan.
Ja, een beetje.
Ja.